Apparently,
Time to start? Or is it time to... Can we get the door closed?
I haven't been to
Thank you, everybody, and welcome to the first Just Saying panel of the weekend. Let us start by introducing ourselves and kind of why we feel we're qualified to talk to you about this. My name is Joshua Morris. I've worked for Score Entertainment, which works with many different anime licenses for card games, Dragon Ball Z, Bleach, Case Closed, Fruits Basket, just to name a few. And then I also worked for Funimation for a time in the marketing department.
yeah, I'm Garrett Wilson. I worked at Score Entertainment for a long time. I've also done various contract work with other video game and anime companies over the years. We have a long history of dealing with card games because we obviously play card games right and anime fans.
So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to kind of go through a little path where we're going to start with the beginning, and we're going to give you a history lesson and a business lesson, and then it's going to get a little better as we start getting into the demise and fall and the whole crazy things that happen here. So let's start with the first slide. First of all, I think we need to talk about how it gets made. The size of the anime market is about $300 million, and the size of the CCG market was about $600 million in 2007. This was the last year that we could find that we could get both figures, and the source comes from ICD2. In the years that followed, the anime industry has kind of had ups and downs, but mostly downs due to new technologies emerging, desperately trying to take advantage of how you can deliver an anime product when someone here in the States can get it mere hours after it's already been released in the United States, or in Japan, I should say. And then you can see that, contrary to belief, the CCG market is actually much larger than the anime market. And that has also experienced up and downs throughout the economic times, but it's still a very strong market, and it doesn't have to face things like digital reproductions or pirating as much, because those tend to be obvious and you could use those in any organized play program. The CCG market, while bigger, is also more competitive, with new products and releases coming out on a monthly basis from any number of publishers. It is entirely possible, especially now with Kickstarter, that someone in this room could, or maybe already has, released a CCG or something into the game market. Whereas if you took like an anime show, something that aired in Japan, it is probably unlikely that anyone here could do an official release of that in the United States. It's just a barrier to get into the anime industry. Whereas the CCG industry is a little more forgiving in letting you in, it's just staying there and staying afloat. That's the trouble.
Yeah, as long as you're doing it with your own properties. Like if you were to try to license an anime property, Japanese generally overvalue their anime properties.
I always liken it to the scene in Rain Man where they ask him how much stuff it is, and he goes, well, how much is a candy bar? About $1 million. How much is a new car? About $1 million. That's kind of what you get when you start negotiating in that realm. It's, everything is $1 million, and they want a lot of tight controls over it. Now, I'm not bashing them. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. If they can get that money, great, and there should be some level of control that they have because it's their product. It's their property.
That's truly why you see only the really long-running shows that have big fan bases that get card games, like Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, Inuyasha, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon. All those things are massive properties.
And then in order to successfully launch a new CCG product based on an anime property, like Garrett was saying, it has to have marketability, and it has to be able to sustain a game. And we're going to get into that in the next slide, I think. It needs to have name recognition. You need to have heard of this anime for people to want to buy it. That's the whole reason why you get licensed properties. Licensed properties are already an established product that is in the market. It needs to be currently airing on television. I can't stress that high enough. If it's not airing on television, that's like a half-hour commercial you're missing out on every week. People will watch it on television, even if you think it's a really stupid show, like some of the stuff on Cartoon Network, and you're like, oh, this is my least favorite show on Cartoon Network. it's still on Cartoon Network, it's still a half-hour commercial, and there are still people who probably like that show, even if you don't, and if they see any kind of product for it, they don't want to buy it. It needs a wide audience. Basically, that means it needs to appeal to more than just like 5-year-old girls or 13-year-old boys. It has to get one of the major demographics. If you target only to an older audience, like 18 plus, there's a market for that, but you're really robbing yourself of the really lucrative underage market. And then it also has to have significant source material as well. As Garrett said, if the anime property isn't very long, you're probably not going to make a long-lasting CCG out of it. It might make a decent game in the box, like Fruits Basket had a game in the box because it was only
It's like 24 episodes.
24 episodes, but it wouldn't have sustained a collectible game.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do an expansion-based business. Anything that you release an initial base set and you want people to buy more product for, like basically how card games are released. Like, if you need to have at least like 100 episodes to even start thinking about it. When you go back and you look at some of the other card games, like Fullmetal Alchemist was out there, and that lasted about 2 years on, I don't know how many, 50 episodes. They were not covering very much source material, and the sets really weren't all that large either, so they were kind of like hampered on what they could do. And another thing too, like when the source material, like if you're doing a show that's about a guy that just wanders around in the desert, I mean, how many versions of the same character can you keep making every expansion? You need to have like a wide range of characters. This is why shows like Naruto and Bleach and Inuyasha work really well. Dragon Ball Z, because there's like infinite characters in those shows that you can keep introducing and whatnot. And as the story arcs progress, because they have hundreds of episodes, you can use new characters and stuff as focal points for marketing campaigns. Finally, Super Saiyan 3 Goku is now in the game. You know, he hasn't been in the game all the way before here he is or whatever. So,
The bounce up here.
the bounce, you know.
The first anime-based card game was Anime Mayhem. Did anyone here play that one? A few of you all played it. And it was released in 1996. And it was actually released by Pioneer. That's why it was comprised entirely of Pioneer at the time, with all these different properties. Bubblegum Crisis, El Hazard, Ranma Half, Tenchi Muyo, Armitage 3rd, Dominion Tank Police, Oh My Goddess, Phantom Quest Corps, Project A-ko, and Dragon Ball Z. They were the first company to have Dragon Ball Z in the United States.
Does anybody in here actually remember how to play Anime Mayhem?
If you set the cards in front of me, I might be able to piece it back together without
that brings up another funny thing, because they changed the rules pretty much every set that came out.
So I tried playing that because I was a big anime fan. I was like, the anime card game is awesome. Never
Dragon
could figure
Ball
out
Z
how-
killed it.
Dragon Ball Z killed it?
Yeah, because they upped the power to 12 to fit the Dragon Ball Z characters compared to everybody else in that.
So you grasped more of the game's concept than I did.
I remember there being specific formats where it was like non-Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
There was another game that came out around the same time as that. Have you ever heard of it? It's called Anime Madness.
I've actually not heard of that one.
I found it in a really weird way. I was like looking for old cards or something, and I saw that there was a site that had stock of it, but they were out of it for whatever reason. And I looked it up, and apparently it was made by one guy who had his dad invest in it, and he put it out the same year as Anime Mayhem.
Do you know what properties were in it at all?
I remember Bubblegum Crisis was in it too, and Riding Beam was, and I think that
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. Because back in like the 90s during this time, that game circulated around all the anime fans.
yeah.
Because you could actually like download like primitive PDFs of it.
Yeah.
And everybody would play it in the anime clubs. Also too, around this time, they had like some of the first anime-based role-playing books were coming out.
Yeah.
Like Big Eyes, Small Mouth, which is the weirdest name ever for it. It makes sense because they all have big eyes and small mouths, but I don't know why you named a product that. I mean,
It's a good system.
is it?
It's a good
I
role-playing
never
system.
did.
That's a terrible name though.
It is a terrible name.
That's why they shortened it to Basso.
Yeah.
Oh, that's much better. This is now the pre-Pokemon era. After Anime Mayhem, no Japanese-based licenses were used for an American TCG release for years, other than, I guess, Anime Madness. Guess we missed that one.
We'll add it to the next version.
We'll add it,
Version 2.
yeah. Up until the release of Pokemon, TCG releases were mostly targeted towards an older audience with licenses based on the X-Files, Star Trek, Dune, and Babylon 5. TCGs were mostly available in hobby and specialty stores, and you could get very few of them at your, say, Walmart or Target. You could probably get Magic the Gathering. I think that was about it.
Not in the 90s.
Not in the 90s. See,
You generally-
Late 90s, you could.
Yeah, if you bought card games at that point and you weren't buying them at a hobby store, you're buying them at like those old things called bookstores when they used to exist. So like, you know, you go to like Borders, I mean even Babbage's I think sold cards back then. So like another thing too is like this era of card games, like all those games, X-Files, Star Trek, Dune, Babylon 5, incredibly complex compared to like what people play today. Like when you look at something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or basically any of the TCG ones for the most part that are based on anime, like Pokemon's a pretty simple game compared to even to like something like Magic and whatnot.
but going back to what we mentioned earlier about what would make a successful anime license, that's kind of also true with other things too, because if you look at these, Babylon 5, Dune, Star Trek, X-Files, they had enough source material, but they were all targeting an older audience. So this really wasn't getting children involved. I'm not saying children never played it, but they weren't the target audience, and any kind of purchases they got were probably incidental.
Yeah, and these are also franchises that people are going to buy. That's one thing you also want to look at. Like if you're going into a card game or you want looking at a property, you also want to look at what other licensed merchandise is out there. Like when we were making a decision to do Fruits Baskets, which is really goes against anything we were saying about what should make a successful card game. We basically just based that on the sale of those hats that everybody wears called Fruits Baskets with the ears and stuff on it. Because when we would go and promote like all the anime properties we were working on, those hats were everywhere, everywhere. So we were like, there has to be money to be made there. Just coming up with something like a board game was our initial idea. And basically, the company at that time was like, we don't do board games. We don't even have the production facilities to board games. So we came up with the idea to basically make this little like game in a box, kind of like Uno type game that was designed to be the exact same dimensions as a manga. So that when it was shipped to stores, we told them not to put it with the games, to put it on the shelves next to the Fruits Baskets manga. Because at that time, Fruits Baskets manga was charting on like the New York Times bestseller list when it came to books and things like that during that big boom. But I mean, like I said, there's a bajillion people wearing Star Trek stuff even at this level too. So.
And then Pokemon. Pokemon pretty much opened up the floodgates for everything. It hit stores in January 1999. It targeted a significantly younger audience. The video games were huge hits already. The Pokemon anime was on TV all the time. And the American TCG release was being handled by Wizards of the Coast, who was an incredibly experienced company at that point. It was probably one of the better companies you could have given that license to. I can't think of too many others that would have been able to handle something of that volume. And it was just the perfect storm to create a new TCG craze. And now let's kind of go back to our whole little what four things does it need to be successful. This is Pokemon versus Anime. Name recognition. Does anyone know what anime that picture is from right there?
Mobile Home Crisis?
No.
Got
I know the
it.
left one, but I know the right one.
Yeah, I know the.
That one is from Project Aiko.
Never heard of
That's
Yeah,
from
see,
the
some
old
of you never heard of it. Here's Ranma Half. Was it currently airing on television? Did it
No.
ever air on television here in the United States? I think maybe one or two of the movies were played.
It's on Xfinity.
Xfinity now, but at the time when this was made,
Back then it was
I
the old
thought it was
days
on
of
Tsunami,
VHS
isn't
tapes.
it?
yeah, you had to buy
No,
like
it was never on
VHS
Tsunami.
tape. So it's like, really, what is
Oh.
this when it comes to marketing it? A wide audience. I know. My mom would have taken that card out of my hand if she saw me with that. And then significant source material. Here we have Armitage. At the time that this came out, Armitage, I believe, had 5 episodes and 1 movie.
They were like OVAs.
Yeah, they were OVAs. I think since the time the game came out, they released another movie. And that's it. It just didn't have anything. And then the boom of anime card games. Between 1996 and 1999, the only anime-based TCGs were Annie Mayhem and Pokemon
And apparently Annie Madness.
and Annie Madness. But over the next decade, over 30 anime-based properties would be launched in the United States. Currently, anime-based TCG launches have slowed to a crawl. Only Bushiroad's Cardfight Vanguard has been released in this decade in the United States. And then here's a nice list that we found of everything that we could. We've got Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, the Score Edition, the good edition, Digimon, Monster Rancher, Gundam Mobile Suit War, which I think was one of 3 different Gundam games they eventually released. Card Captors, that bastardized version they made of Card Captor Sakura. Metabots, Yu-Gi-Oh, Dot Hack.
We should probably stop. Yu-Gi-Oh!
Which Dot Hack?
Dot Hack.
Enemy.
It was based off of. It was based off of.
The anime.
The anime and the video games, because they had like the most atrocious looking cards I've ever
They
seen.
had like the video game pictures on it.
Yeah, where they would take video game, like screenshots from PS1 games and put them on
God.
cards.
I remember there being cards that just had the template and it would just be a full word or something.
Yeah, it would be, some of the things didn't have it. Just,
Yeah, let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh for a second though. Like, you know, back in the 80s, you know, when I was growing up and everything, there was all the criticism around the cartoons that were designed just to sell toys, like Transformers, He-Man, stuff like that. So how do you guys feel Yu-Gi-Oh factored in with being designed just to sell cards?
Well, here's the funny
Somebody
thing
should have
about
done it
this.
earlier.
Yeah. The funny thing about this is there are some shows that are designed to sell a card game. It's like they had the card game first and then they made the show. And then there are some shows that were just existed and then they made a card game out of it. So it kind of went both ways here. Because both of us are students of business and we've both worked mostly on the business aspects of this, although both of us have done creative stuff. Garrett, game designer.
Yeah, I was a designer for 6 years. I can point to the ones on here that I worked on that actually succeeded, which not very many. And then the ones that, did well.
Yeah, so when we mention the things of what it takes to be successful, and we mentioned, is it currently airing on television? That's really big. That's a really big factor. And I know we all enjoy games, we all enjoy these TV shows, but the truth of the matter is, and I mean we all recognize this, is that it's all a business. The card game industry is a business. If it sells, then it's going to keep selling. If it doesn't, then it's going to stop. They're going to stop making the game. If you make something that just isn't going to sell, like it doesn't have a TV show, then that card game is going to go nowhere. You'll get one set out, like Dragon Booster. Yeah, you'll get something like that where like the show just came out and sputtered and they stopped airing it after so many episodes.
Yeah, but going back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is really important in a lot of different things. With the success of Pokemon, which started off as like, the video games and all that stuff, it kind of, this idea of the transmedia property came out where something we attempted with Dragon Booster, we were part of, but we failed miserably. Basically with Yu-Gi-Oh! It was like a full frontal assault. Like they designed a show where they played the cards, the show comes out, the cards come out, the manga comes out, toys come out, the video games come out. They were all designed to work as one unit, so they would all feed off the same advertising dollars and things like that. And one would kind of like you get into the show, you buy the cards, you buy the video games, you buy the toys, you buy the manga. When like other things like let's take Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball Z or something like that, where those properties were out for years and already had established kind of like fan bases and whatnot, and the card games came way later after they were very established. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was designed from the beginning to be, the card game was just one component of this big business plan they had in place. Which is actually like what a lot of the things that are like out of Japan now. They do that quite a bit. You see a lot of shows and stuff that come out and they have video game tie-ins that it's kind of like just something that's been adapted. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Did it and was really successful. I mean, everybody can see it's still around to this day. What is it? We'll go back down the list.
Yeah, and I mean, as we go down the list, you could ask yourself all those 4 questions that we had where it's like, is this on TV? Does it have significant source material? Is it available to a wide audience? Things like that.
And as we go down, I played a lot of these games. This is when I was designing, so we would get these products into the office and we'd have to evaluate them to basically keep up with what our competitors are doing. I have some funny stories about some of these games a lot of you guys probably never played, and I can tell you why you probably never played.
I actually picked up Sailor Moon, and that game, I really wanted to like it.
I like Sailor Moon. It lasted 2 sets. And obviously, at that point, card games target, like girls weren't really a market for card games.
And the central mechanic was Gen Con.
Yeah, central mechanic was like whenever cards would battle and whatnot, you pay paper, rock, scissors to resolve card effects. which was pretty awesome. I thought it was awesome.
I like that.
Yeah, it was great. 'Cause we used to sit around and we would drink and play Sailor Moon all the time. You know, because it added another element of strategy. Because there is like this whole competitive paper rock scissors leagues out there and whatnot. They do the world champions for it in Canada every year.
You're not 16
That's
that
bad.
game gets out.
Oh no, I was old enough to buy alcohol.
Man, no, yeah, Sailor Moon. Of course, if you look at Pokemon, a major mechanic of that is flipping coins as well.
Yeah,
So,
you have to look. Pokemon's also for children for the most part, even though there's plenty of adults that play Pokemon. And
yeah.
it's having complex, like Magic has pretty complex stacks and stuff like that with card resolve.
And there's still coin flips in Magic.
But it's not a predominant feature on like Pokemon cards would be.
Okay,
like
true.
I didn't think it had some Pokemon.
That's a rare happening when you get a Pokemon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also Magic goes a lot to Pokemon, because I bet you right now, if you go and find people generally our age who
Yes.
are old enough to grow into this, I bet you if you ask them what their first game was, most of them will say something like Pokemon or
This is actually
Yu-Gi-Oh.
an important thing about the late '90s, like anime card game boom. Is at that point, card games themselves were mainly an adult thing. They were looked at as extensions of D&D. I don't know if anybody remembers in the late '90s when 60 Minutes would run the specials on how schools were banning Magic cards because they said it was the devil's game. Because it was, you know, designed by people who did D&D and whatnot. So like, it was not a popular thing amongst like the mass audience, unlike it is now, where Magic's pretty much like a sport because of the, you know, how it's taken off the internet and whatnot. But you had a whole influx of kids who were going into the hobby stores to buy Pokemon, and later on Yu-Gi-Oh, and then you had a whole, like when Dragon Ball Z hit, its audience was like teenage boys. And you got a whole bunch of teenage boys that go into these hobby stores and they start buying this game, and you know, they get into it, they like the card games and whatnot. And basically once they start, you know, you go off to college, if you either outgrow the anime and you stop playing the game, or you outgrow the anime but you like card games, and the next logical step is you want to go into something like Magic, which is like the, you know, the big granddaddy of them all. So a lot of people, you know, went on to play Magic. And even like my hobby store where I play Magic and whatnot, I talk to the guys there all the time that are like freshmen in college and whatnot, and they're like, yeah, we grew up playing Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Dragon Ball Z. That's what we played, and we didn't get into Magic till way later after we just kind of got tired of playing those games because they weren't into the shows anymore, or they were tired of being the oldest guy at the tournament. You know?
So yeah, we did not have the Beyblade.
Funny story about Beyblade.
Go ahead, tell your funny story about Beyblade.
We
No
got
one
a
thinks Beyblade.
case of Beyblade for some reason. The store bought a case of Beyblade. They bought a case of starters, which I don't know why you buy a case of starters. It's ridiculous because all the starters are the same, so we had 300 of the same starter. We bought a case of boosters. So we got a case of boosters, alright. So we sit down and we used to do this thing where we read the rule book, because our rule books were always atrocious and no one could figure out how to play the games after reading the rule book. So we're like, if we read everybody else's rule books, we're going to figure out how to write these properly. The problem was no one else could write rule books out. It's hard to write a rule book. So we sit down, we learn to play the game, and we start playing the two decks against each other. So there was like two different starter decks in it. There was a blue one and a red one. So we start playing it, and we get about 4 turns into it, and we're like, wow, you know, if I play this card and this card, and I can get that card will allow me to get this card and this card again, then I can get that card, and that card will allow me to get this card and this card again. So I was like, yeah, it's like, wow, I just went infinite on turn 4, my first game out of starter. You wonder why that game never lasted.
Yeah.
When you could buy a starter deck and go infinite out of it. So we didn't even open the rest of the product. We had a whole case that we used as a doorstop.
Do you remember who made that though?
It was a Decipher game.
No, of course.
Just
not.
basically, because of the success of Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh, basically this idea came about where like, let's just license everything anime that has managed to get on TV. And you look at everything on this list, and it was all on TV at one point.
I don't remember
Ultimate
Ultimate Muscle.
Muscle?
The Cartoon Network knows about wrestlers.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why.
I think it was called Kanuki Man in Japanese.
Yeah, it was Kanuki Man in Japanese, but in America it was Ultimate. So they had video games and stuff for it. But
No, the only one I don't think on there, Initial D was not on TV.
okay, yeah, I think you're probably right on there.
I was gonna say, it was popular in Japan when I was there, but I
Initial
never
D?
seen it over here.
Yeah.
It's still an anime card game.
It's still an anime
No,
card game,
yeah.
But I mean,
that.
this was made by AEG, and it's a game about racing.
I thought it was terrible. I played the demo and I was like,
And
this game is garbage.
It's not as bad as like you would think, because it's not like if someone made a
no,
NASCAR
it's
game.
bad.
No, it's not as bad as you think, but it's still
Yeah,
bad.
where you just turn left and right, you know, the whole game is like right turn, right turn.
No, it would be all left.
Oh, left turn. It's, yeah, it's like,
Yeah, I was gonna say. So it's basically the same rules as NASCAR.
Yeah.
Turn left.
I know that like it's another one of those things. It lasted one set and it was never heard from again. Mainly because like most people didn't even know what initial D was. And having known from experience, like companies like AEG, they're established out there, and they had, you know, Legend of the Five Rings was real big at that time. Warlord was real big at that time. They had that one based on the spies. That was also
Spycraft?
Spycraft or something like that. That was also in
Spycraft,
hobby
yeah.
stores. So, like, basically, we kind of did it with Yu Yu Hakusho. When we pitched that to retailers, no one knew what Yu Yu Hakusho was because it wasn't on TV at that point, and it really wasn't all that popular of a property compared to like Dragon Ball Z and whatnot. Like anime fans knew what it was, but the store owners and stuff didn't know what that was. But just based on the other companies' success of those games, like L5R is still around and all that stuff, they would buy it just because, hey, everything else that company makes sells, so let's buy it. And you know that worked for us for a little bit because we released things like Dragon Ball Z and Inuyasha, which were real popular. But then we released things like Dragon Boosters, case closed, and
Those are well, Dragon
What
Booster
is-
not, but case.
What
closed.
is Dragon Booster?
okay.
I'm not
Alright, okay. There's a lot of guys. Okay.
Prepare to get an education.
Okay, there's a lot of guys in this room that have known us for a long time, and they were all players of the score entertainment games. And Dragon Booster is notorious with score entertainment because they basically got swindled by these people who came in and like, we're making this show that's going to be on Walt Disney. It's going to have video games about it. It's going to have toys about it, and it's computer animated. They're like, it's computer animated, so it's like a Pixar movie, you know, and things like that. They had all the right buzzwords you would want to hear. And then you watch the show, and it looks like a bad PS2 animation, you know, but it is animated like a Pixar movie. Okay? And pretty much they got all these companies on board. Basically, like I was saying, to do the transmedia property. Like they wanted to emulate you.
They were trying to manufacture a hit.
They were, yeah, basically trying to manufacture a hit. So our brilliant people who analyzed the properties were like, that sounds amazing. We're going to do that. We're going to buy that thing. So the property came out, like the show came out, and no one knew what it was because while it was on Disney, it was on Toon Disney in Canada. So we go out to release it and whatnot, and no one knows what it is. None of the store owners, we don't know what that is. We don't think it's going to sell, but we're going to buy it from you guys anyway because all your other stuff is popular and it sells in our store. Huge failure. Huge failure. Like we actually got Walmart and Target and all the big mass retailers. I'm talking to buy truckloads of this stuff. And none of it sold, and it all got shipped back to us because you have to sell on consignment when you sell to retail in the CCG industry. All got shipped back, all right? And I remember having a conversation because most of our stuff is based on Japanese properties, we only had the rights to sell in North America. Dragon Booster was one of the few properties we actually had worldwide rights to sell. So we could sell it in Europe and places like that. I don't know if anybody ever watched the show Reboot. It was a computer animated show. That was a show that was out of Europe. And at that time, shows
I want
that
to say
were...
Reboot also had a card game.
It did. I want to say it did, yeah. And anybody ever watched a show called The Yoko?
Oh, yeah.
That had a card game as well. Both of those card games were from Europe and were huge hits because both of that was the style of show that people in Europe liked.
The weird computer animation.
Yeah, they were used to it. It wasn't like, since it wasn't Pixar and it was really early on in the era of computer animated
came
shows.
out in like 93 or something.
Yeah, it's old. So like I would say, like you guys need to sell this game in Europe. You guys need to sell this game in Europe. You guys need to sell this game in Europe. And of course, we didn't even have distribution copies in Europe to even figure out who to sell it to there. We could put it in the stores because we never sold in Europe. And well after we had stopped producing the game, I found out that we had actually ended up selling a majority of our Dragon Booster product. And I'm talking millions of dollars of unsold product that was sitting in the warehouse for like 3 or 4 years. Randomly enough, years later, the show became a big hit in Israel, India, all these weird territories, Italy, Greece, they all loved it. and we had 2 sets of the game that we produced that was, I'm talking, we could fill this room up with booster packs. 75% of them got shipped to India. Never saw them again. No idea what happened to them. We didn't even translate the game to their language, you know. And I know, like, that game was so weird because the people had this idea in their head that they were going to create a new language.
Yeah.
Draconomicon. And we ended up printing an alternate parallel set as inserts that was in this language called Draconomicon that no one knew how to read. Except for the people that created the show.
Who out of your guys' team designed Dragon Booster?
Oh, David, Chippy.
David Everett.
There's a lot, and they were trying to make it, they wanted it to be for children. And so there was lots of corn flipping and whatnot in the game. And to our credit, we were the only people, because Jack Specific, a lot of people got burned really bad on that property. These guys were smart. They came in, swindled, took everybody's money, and then just built. You know, they kind of pyramid schemed us. But we actually released our product. A lot of people just ended up taking a hit. Years later, Konami, who did the video game, finally released the video game, and it was a DS game where you like tap the screen to make the dragon run. And the thing I failed to mention was the dragons did not look like regular dragons. They looked like giant iguanas that you rode. And we would complain about that constantly, and they said, no, we're trying to reinvent what dragons look like.
Why?
Really?
I don't know. See, it's so weird. So like years later, that actually came out. Like none of the action figures came out because we were kind of the first product out the door, and everybody saw us take a bath on it. Full of plugs. Those idiots got suckered.
I think David used to brag that it was the very first racing-based card game that got a second release.
Yeah, we were competing with Initial D at the time as far as like racing card games. It's like you race. The whole point of the card games, like I don't even remember how you did it, but you raced.
I've got a funny story about it too because I wasn't with Score at the time. I was like one of the players, and I won like a bunch of events or whatever. And one day, my mom calls me down and is like, "You got this package." And I'm like, "From who?" Score Entertainment. And I got this giant package from Score Entertainment. And I open it up, and it's full of Dragon Booster. And there's a letter that says, "Dear Joshua, because you are one of our like popular and more prominent players, we decide to give you all this Dragon Booster stuff so that you can play this with your friends and tell them all about it." Yeah, I didn't know what to do with it. I was like, I don't even want to open this crap because I knew like there was nothing I could open up and be like, oh, well, this card's worth money.
One good thing that did come out that was like worked for us when it came to the release of Dragon Booster is that we set up this huge organized play circuit for the first year where we were going to get about $100,000 in prizes over a various amount of tournaments, which basically turned into me getting 5 free vacations. So they would send me to this like a convention and they'd be like, you're going to run the Dragon Booster like West Coast Championships. I show up, we're supposed to give out $45,000 in prizes. Not one person signed up for the tournament. So obviously no one played it because it was a big failure. So I was like, I got a free trip to California. I'm booked here for 4 days. And after like 3 tournaments of that, they canceled. They finally got wise to it. They canceled the rest of the trips and on all that stuff. But I kept my mouth shut. So
while I worked at Score, I was like dicking around in the warehouse one day, and I found all of the trophies for Dragon Booster and stuff. And they were all like these giant plastic cups.
They're like giant pimp cups.
Pimp cups. So what I did was I just asked, are we going to use these at all? Can I just have them? They're like, whatever, you can take these Dragon Booster things home. So I took all the Dragon Booster trophies home, and I just removed the cup on all of them, and I was drinking like a pimp. I would invite people from my frat over, they'd be drinking out of like 3rd place Dragon Booster. And they're like, what the hell is this?
There was a big one. It was huge. Yeah, we as jokes, we just give them to all of our friends. We're like, you are now the 4th best player in the world at Dragon Booster. Because we made 32 of them because we had this. They got this idea in their head to think about like there was going to be hundreds of people at these events, so they can make top 32 trophies. So, which in itself is a dumb idea because I mean we had to ship 32 trophies to the tournament.
I want to say I sold like the 1st place trophy.
Yeah.
I want to say like Max Williams has it.
Yeah.
He was talking about it last night.
I hope he has it, so if you see a guy walking around with a pimp cup, that's what it feels like to be the Dragon Booster World Champion.
Like 6 of the Dragon Booster deck boxes.
Yeah, I saw a guy playing Warlord today. He was using a Dragon Booster deck box. So you can buy Dragon Booster out there if you really want to try.
Oh, I saw some.
It's about 25 cents a box.
Oh,
It's really cheap. It's like $1 a box.
I think the saddest thing that ever happened to me when I was working at Score is I was here at a Gen Con and I go by one booth. I think it was Strike Zone or something. And they're just like, we're gonna give you free booster boxes. And I just walked by the booth and they handed me a bag with free booster boxes. They were doing this to everyone. I look inside and it was like Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Booster. Like the bad Dragon Ball Z that Score released.
I've bought a ton of really old card games, dead card games, stuff that's been gone for 5, 6, 7, sometimes a decade old. And I've bought Dragon Booster boxes. Why is it that Dragon Booster boxes, among all the old games that I've ever opened, they're the only ones that smell like death?
Oh, did
Did you not hear the part about the Dragonomicon?
that game had the weird plastic cards where you could put them all together.
Okay.
If anybody even attempted to play the game, like you had a dragon and you got like the way they would make the dragons. That the show was so weird. Like they had dragons and they would put different gears and stuff on the dragons to make them like run
Yeah,
faster.
wasn't it like they were like giant iguanas and you put handlebars
They
on
were,
them?
yeah, they usually look like giant iguanas. I say dragons, but in house we always refer to it as iguana booster, which would piss people off.
And they were fighting an evil bad guy.
Yeah, they were. There was like an evil dragon rider or something.
I remember that show.
So the evil dragon just raced against them?
Yes.
That's why he was evil?
Yeah. They wrote, because we had the scripts for the first 100 episodes, and they only produced 52. And I found out like years later, because one of the guys who voiced the main character became like, he's a predominant voice actor for anime now. This is like one of his first things. And he basically was doing a panel, and somebody asked him about like, oh, what's going to happen on the next season of Dragon Booster? And he's like, oh, they're not making another season of Dragon Booster. That got canceled. And apparently the company had never released officially that the show had been canceled, and that they were still promoting like the new season was coming this fall. And he also spilled the beans that Disney never paid them the rights, never paid them for airing it. They refused to air it after they saw the initial like first episode. So they were so desperate, I guess. You know, they're like, if we can just get the show on air, somebody's going to release one of their products based on it, and then we can charge them licensing, which just happened with us. So they gave the show to Disney for free, and Disney just ran it for free until they figured out something else to put on it.
We'll use this as fun.
We got nothing better.
Let's keep going down.
Yeah. So let's see. Initial D, which sucked. Ultimate Muscle, Kanuki Man. I have no idea about that one. Hakusho.
Oh,
Do you have anything
yeah.
you want to add about Hakusho?
I talk a lot about Yu Yu Hakusho, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said, but not much that really.
Well, anybody who played Yu Yu Hakusho, they know.
Yeah, like Hakusho pretty much going first turn consistently after like set 2 or 3.
Well, in the realm of Score Entertainment, that game is important because pretty much the guys, like, that was the first time I ever got to like design card sets and design cards, and they kind of just like given up on it. And we had a contract for 6 sets, and they were like, we'll just let the playtesting staff design it, which is why anybody who played it, suddenly it was like the game's kind of like was okay. In the second set, suddenly the resource system's useless because we just made every card we gave basically the equivalent of mana. So it's like, I'll play this creature and I get 5 mana floating in my pool for no reason, because we had never really designed cards before, so we didn't know a lot about like making good sets. And then by the time the 4th set, 5th set came out, there was like so many alternate winning conditions, and you could go infinite first turn, you could draw no cards, you know. So it was kind of like where everybody got their training wheels and basically learned what not to do when designing card games. Like, it sounds awesome to make cards that are like, if you get 70 energy, you win the game. That's probably not a good idea in a game where every card gives you energy like times 10. So.
I was still learning. Bleach came around. They went to the playtest people, and we were like almost all completely new. So they're just like, yeah, go ahead and create new. So if you ever played Bleach from Dragon or from Score, same deal as Yu Yu Hakusho. It was basically a bunch of people just making effects and not really working together with each other. And that's why there's a lot of really random things.
Don't get us wrong, we loved working at Score. It was fun.
Yeah.
And we had some really good hits, but the funny stuff is the stuff that that came out that didn't work because it was obvious that it wasn't going to work, but it ended up coming out anyway.
That brings up a really good story again. Like, as Garrett was saying, sometimes companies would court us, and they would just be like, well, we want a game. And the management would come to us and say, like, oh, well, company X wants a game based on this property. Will you guys just make a game or whatever? They opened it up to everyone, which was really cool, where it's like, even if you're a playtester or whatever, just make a game, and we'll see if we find something that we think is right and will work, we'll take it and we'll present it to them. So there was this one company that wanted anime property to be made into a game. It was currently airing on TV right now. I don't like to say the name of it, because I don't know if we get in trouble for saying the name of it. Yeah, let's not say the name of this card game. We'll just say mysterious card game that was airing on television currently, and it was
What network?
Cartoon Network.
At night?
At night. It was about 50 episodes or so. I know it lasted like 2 seasons, and they gave us a bunch of really weird rules.
Oh yeah, I remember this story.
To make the game, and
Who goes to this show?
rule number 1, and this show was actually targeted for a much older
Yeah, it
audience.
was really popular.
It was really
At the time,
popular,
at the
yeah.
time.
That's why we
Really
don't want to say the name. But rule number 1 is you couldn't like have anyone die in the game. There could be no death, which is really weird because death was kind of in the title of the show.
Yeah, it was the central
And
theme.
and then the second rule of it, the second rule we had that we couldn't do is in under no circumstances were you allowed to write names in a notebook. So we had to make this game on this mysterious property I won't name that that you couldn't have people die and you couldn't write names in a notebook. So it was just like, well, what were you supposed to do at this point? And it eventually just became a whodunit. Like I changed it so you eliminate suspects of whoever's holding the death warrant or whatever stupid stuff like that. And the game was really terrible based on like all the rules. Like I think only 2 or 3 of us tried to come up with rules mechanics for a game.
I didn't even try.
Yeah.
They said like the restrictions. Not really.
Yeah, it was mostly us new people who were just like, oh man, this will be our
It's like us
chance.
with Yu Yu Hakusho. They're like,
Yeah.
we need someone to make 3 sets of Yu Yu Hakusho. Can you guys do it?
Yeah, we can do it.
Little knowing, not knowing what we were doing. But
That's like the thing you always wait for.
Hey, I must say, I was a big fan of Yu Yu Hakusho.
but it's really strange. Like Yu Yu Hakusho
The show
has a
is
crazy fanatical fan base of people who love the show, and then there's crazy people who love the card game still, which I don't understand because like
It is I won't lie, it is a bit of a mess.
it is a mess. Because like
It's not that much. I mean, I played Magic back in '95 when I
that's
was a
true.
kid.
Yeah.
That was a mess.
So we have a whole other list after
Yeah.
this. So let's keep
So
on
yeah,
going.
Super Deformed Gundam got a game.
God, don't remind me of that.
Mega Man NT Warrior, Knights of the Zodiac. I have no idea why that one got one.
Isn't that Saint Seiya?
Saint Seiya.
Saint Seiya, yeah.
Yeah, I have no
And you
idea.
want to see some ugly cards? Knights of the Zodiac has second place.
I thought you were gonna point to Inuyasha.
Oh, Inuyasha has beautiful cards. They're beautiful.
Yeah, I'll let you introduce Inuyasha.
Yes. Oh yeah, Inuyasha.
Thanks for taking your cue there.
Yeah, Inuyasha. Which coincidentally, as far as releases go, is the longest running score game. We did more releases of that than we did of Dragon Ball Z. By like 1 set. But Inuyasha was real funny because at the time we bought Inuyasha the rights, so because we were trying to get Naruto, and this is kind of before Inuyasha like became like a real big anime property in the States. It had like a big cult following, and we would go to the anime shows to run the Dragon Ball Z tournaments and whatnot, and we saw we'd see all the Inuyasha fans and whatnot. But you can't take what you see in an anime show as a grain of salt, because you go there and it's a highly concentrated group of people who are into anime. Once you leave there, it's not like Dragon Ball Z or Pokemon where you can just be walking around at Walmart and see people wearing a Dragon Ball Z shirt or
That would be
Pokemon
awesome.
stuff, So we got the property really cheap, and it was one of those things. Like I was working on Yu Yu Hakusho at the time, and they were like, "Does anybody have any ideas to make an Inuyasha game?" And they came to the playtesters. So Michael Gibson and I got together and we came up with the mechanics for it, and we did the first set, and it came out, and it was one of those things where like the stores just bought it because they were like, well, all your other stuff that is doing well, so we're just going to buy that. And then out of nowhere, like the first set exploded and became really, really popular. And So there's not one of those things like Dragon Booster. So like the next year, we were like 3 sets in, so we set up this like nice, decent-sized OP network for it, where we would have like the universe to score 7 points as Preston knows because he wrecked everybody that year at it. We won all of our money. But we would go to the tournaments and we would see these huge sales numbers that were like at that time rivaling Dragon Ball Z in sales. And we'd have like 30 or 40 people at a tournament. And then we'd look to the tournament next to it and it'd be Dragon Ball Z and there'd be 300. But Inuyasha was selling just as much product. And it turned out to be that there's this crazy contingent of just people who collected Inuyasha cards because they loved the show. And we would, we did all types of crazy stuff with the property where we would have like really fancy looking art cards with like sketch art and stuff on it because we were trying to appeal to those collectors. Later on, we started putting like autograph cards in there and whatnot. But it was just weird because it was our highest seller for like 3 years, but like not a lot of people really played the card game. It was just collectors. It was like collector cards.
My favorite thing about it, to kind of paraphrase Barbarossa, didn't really have rules, really more like guidelines.
Yeah, early on, yeah. It had some rules issues later on, and then later on it had some balance issues, just because the playtesting kind of got shifted away. We were realizing that people weren't necessarily playing the card game, weren't buying it to play the card game, they were buying it to collect it, like the mass of people. But the people who were playing the game, for the most part, a lot of them, that was the only game they were playing. And then we had like 5 or 6 guys, like Preston and Carlo and whatnot, they would just go and wreck everybody because they took the game pretty serious. And you go to a tournament and you look at it. It's one of the few card games where I would go to judge the tournament and I'd look out into the audience and I'm like, Kagome, Sango, Moroku, and Inuyasha all just registered for the tournament. And we'd have people actually show up in their cosplay costumes and stuff to play the tournament. So we started kind of catering to that when it came to our marketing of the events. So like, we would give out, like I would give promos to the people who showed up in costume, and then we would do events for like, we would do trivia and whatnot and stuff. Kind of make it more like a social event than a tournament in a lot of ways, which was good and bad. I kind of felt bad for the tournament guys because they were really into it, but it's kind of what we needed to do to keep the fans interested in it. Because a lot of fans would come playing the tournament, so they get one tournament promo for the collection, and then they get their ass handed to them for 5 rounds because they weren't really playing the game. They weren't playing the game at that high of a level. Next, Duel Masters. Woo! Magic Jr. Magic Jr., yeah. Another Watson project. And here's another one of ours. Dragon Ball GT. Boo. Boo. Yeah, you can see the privilege of that. I don't want to talk about that.
Someone got a question.
I'm kind of curious. Do you know anything about like the new Duel Master series that was made by like Hasbro or something?
Hasbro, okay, I do know a little bit about that.
Because I've seen the show and I know it's nothing
Yeah,
like...
they're basically trying to reboot it. Duel Masters was created with the sole purpose of trying to get people eventually into Magic. As I was explaining earlier, you take these kids who are into the anime and whatnot, and Duel Masters follow the exact same thing as Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it was built with the show and the cards and all this other merchandise to feed into each other as like one big entity in the marketplace. And Duel Masters in its day was pretty successful. It actually took off in Japan.
Yeah, it's really big in Japan.
In a huge way. Where it started rivaling like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon there for a while in Japan. And the new Duel Masters thing is kind of just trying to reboot that. Because there is no, really outside of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon right now, there is no kind of like feeder game that's sending people into Magic. And to them it's beneficial that they would own, because back at this time too, Pokemon was Watson property. So they loved it because it was getting people into hobby stores. Kids were buying their product, and if they got tired of Pokemon, they'd move on to Magic. And they're kind of trying to get that back, so they have that middle ground to get people that beginning product.
But isn't it weird that an American company is producing a show instead of like just using dubbed episodes or something?
I don't know.
New segment.
Right.
Yeah, we don't judge.
We don't judge
based on what country releases it, even though this panel is about just anime.
Yeah.
We could probably add a few more titles on here that were just straight up cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
But, case closed.
Woo! Ours, yeah.
I just want to call out Mr. Jeffrey Brewster over there, who owns at least 25% of the entire print run of this. like that's not a joke. Like, I'm pretty sure he actually owns 25% of it.
This is
I
another
bet
one of those.
Duel has more than that.
I don't know, maybe.
This is another one of those things, though, that when you
I
look
sold
at
him those cards.
when you look at it on paper, that show is huge. That's Detective Boy Conan. I guess
They
everybody
can't take one.
in Japan, it's everybody kind of
There's
knows
no
it.
boy in the color.
Is Detective Conan? Okay, it's hugely popular in Japan, and it's a merchandising juggernaut in a lot of places in the world. But like, it never took off in America. A lot of things too is it's like they try to make it like a Scooby-Doo kids show, but there's like decapitations and weird like really graphic, violent murder scenes in it. But it's a kid show at heart. It's that weird Japanese middle ground of how like they're, I guess their kids are either more mature than our kids or what. I don't know.
They just don't know how to properly, raise their.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes down to our criteria, I mean, at that time, it was on TV, but it was on at 4 o'clock in the morning on Cartoon Network.
I think it originally had a better slot, and then it was just like,
it
holy
was,
happy.
it was on at like 11 or midnight. It was on like a more time slot.
Yeah, and there's a huge amount of content for that show. I mean, it's still airing now.
It's ridiculous. Episode like 670 or something.
Yeah, there's 670 episodes. I mean, I can make cards on that for a decade, but it just never took off in America. And we put out 2 sets.
To me, that show, I never understood like why people liked it, because it never, to me, seemed like it had a lot of rewatchable value, because the whole plot of each episode was pretty much geared towards solving the mystery and not really kind of advancing any of the new characters they'd introduced for that episode, or even any of the old characters that they already had. So it'd be like, solve the mystery, and then once you figured out how the mystery was solved, it was like an Encyclopedia Brown book. It's like, why would I read that over again? I already know the answer.
Power up the full! Power up the full!
So it was quite literally.
Yeah, but that's
Scooby-Doo the
fancy.
anime.
Yeah. So another thing too that we should point out is that you notice that most of these shows on this list, they're based about shows that have conflict and fighting in them, things that are easy to put into card games. Like, it's kind of hard to make a competitive one-on-one card game where you solve mysteries, in a competitive. It's like trying to play competitive Clue or something like that against only one person. So it was really hard to kind of achieve what they wanted. Like, if at that time we hadn't done the Fruits Baskets thing where we released one self-contained product, if we had done that with Case Closed, we probably would have had a lot more success with it. Because I mean, we could have made it more like a board game, like a multiplayer thing. And the original pitch, that I did for that game was it was going to be, when you bought a starter deck, it was going to be something like a HeroClix type setup where it came with a giant map board in it, and we were going to have and you played with a deck of cards that would manipulate how you move a miniature piece on the board or whatnot, and inside of each starter decks it'd be randomized maps, like HeroClix type thing. And we would have perforated cards, instead of a high-tech or a foil card in the pack, each pack would have a card that was perforated, which would be a new figure that you could punch out and use on the game. So you could have different versions of Conan and whatnot. And you would, basically go around and you build a deck that you would use to move your character around and whatnot. So you could, and then there would be events and stuff like that. But that idea got scrapped because they were there's no way anybody's going to buy a pack of cards where everything's perfect and going to punch straight out. They're there's no way anybody's going to buy that. 6 months later, anybody remember that ridiculous pirate game where you punched out the pirate ships and played? That game came out, huge runaway success, and we're sitting there staring at our sales department like a bunch of idiots. A bunch of idiots. So.
Yeah, but then they came to you with this great new property called Dragon Booster.
And this is another thing too. This is during that era where they were Dragon Booster, guys, don't worry, Dragon Booster's going to be all right. Next we have Full Metal Alchemist. We skipped one.
Wait, yeah, we did that on purpose.
We did that on purpose. Yeah, we did that one. We don't. That's the other Dragon.
That battle never happened.
That battle never happened.
What was the logic behind that one?
There was.
I can understand GT a little bit.
Okay,
I never got the logic behind it.
Okay, I'll go into a little bit since you asked. The reason they switched the game rules with GT is we didn't want to do it internally. Internally, we wanted to just keep the same rules and start cycling sets, because at that point we're getting to the point where the barrier of entry for any new players was getting too hard. And there's just too many cards to buy. So we were like, let's cycle sets. They're like, well, let's not cycle sets. Let's just make a new game and ignore all the old cards. Because to them, they just looked at Dragon Ball GT as not necessarily an extension of the Dragon Ball franchise, but as a new show. Because we had to buy a separate license for it. You know, we couldn't, and there was weird things too, where like when we mixed like the Z, like we had cards in the game in GT that used old Z imagery, but all that imagery came from the movies because we still had licenses to movies, but we couldn't mix like licenses from the original show and whatnot. And they just wanted new rules for some reason. And the original version of the game that we did, it was almost the exact same game, but it had kind of cleaned up some of the rules. Like some of the things that were gone out of the cleaned up version were things like the power rule was gone, the phases of the game were a little bit different, just standard stuff that was confusing in the way that the game was originally written, and it cleaned it up some. Like we added like a little like targeting type terminology on the cards where you could like, instead of like saying like discard or non-combat play, we would say like discard target non-combat play, you know, so it made more sense from a card game perspective. But and then when it came time for us to like focus on playtesting and things like that, like the GT rules themselves were fine when we were only playing with the GT sets. But they understood from Magic that you still kind of had to support all that old product, and the only reason we ran tournaments from the upper management point for the old product, where you could use the old product with the new rules, is because we had still warehouses of that stuff sitting back there, so we had to sell it. So the best way to do that was, you know, you want people to still play with those old cards. And we were told, like, it doesn't matter about that format, because we have like two formats, basically, like, think Magic terms, Type 1, Type 2. And everybody knows like Type 1 Magic is a lot crazier than Type 2 Magic. And they were like, don't even bother playtesting, you know, standard or whatever it was. I don't remember what it was called. Was it expanded? Expanded,
yeah.
Don't even bother playtesting expanded. Like, it doesn't matter. But that was like predominantly like the most popular tournament format.
Oh yeah,
that's what everybody wanted to play. And GT as a whole isn't really a very good show.
Oh, not at all.
So as soon, and it was on Cartoon Network for a little bit, and then Cartoon Network pulled it. And as soon as it got pulled, like all interest from like mass retail, so Walmart, Target, all those places, they're like, we don't even want to buy the new GT sets. We're like, we want to buy the old Z sets because Z's still on TV and it's really popular. So we would sell them all the old Z product, and it would get repackaged in these like Sensu Blast blisters where you get like 40 packs for $20 and stuff like that. They didn't want to buy any of the GT product because to them GT was a different show. They didn't put the connection together. That it was too, you know, it's an extension of the same brand. And like we ended up just having to eventually cancel it because there was no interest in GT whatsoever as a property. And then when it came time for Dragon Ball Z, we still had the rights to Dragon Ball Z, and we were like, you know, we don't want to give up on it, and we think there's still money to be made, not if we go use GT, but if we go back to Z. The problem was they designed a game and re-released it into the market that had no compatibility whatsoever to any of the previous existing cards. So it didn't last very long, because everybody wanted to play with the old cards.
Yeah.
No one wanted to play with the new cards. Everybody still wanted to play with the old cards. It just didn't last very long. And at that point, too, even then, Z was starting to dip as far as its popularity. People were starting to move on to other shows. Full Metal Alchemist was out at that time. It was taking a lot of its steam. A lot of the kids that got into Dragon Ball Z in the 90s were now going, you know, off to college and adults and whatnot. Like now, Dragon Ball Z's had a resurgence because of Kai. Kai's on TV, it's on two networks, so there's been a resurgence in the Dragon Ball Z property, but at that point it was really faltering. So we eventually just had to pull it over. And then you'll see later on down the list that another company will pick up Dragon Ball and try their hand on it. Because I mean, it is still one of the largest properties in the world. So they tried it, and they made it last for a couple of years, but even they couldn't keep it around.
Yeah, it was the system that worked. They worked the same system as Naruto, so the two systems are compatible.
Mm-hmm. So we'll keep going on. Gundam War.
There's one like 3 or 4.
Did anybody play that one?
I didn't know.
I knew a little bit about it because I like Gundam, but I didn't play it because I was playing Inuyasha at the time. So I heard that when that game came out, they forgot to print like the lands or resources for it, and people had to proxy them to tournaments and stuff.
I held one of the booster packs once. I think that's the closest playing it I got.
Okay, and this is right around when Bandai starts entering the market as far as card games. They're still around, you know. One Piece property never really took off in America. Thus, the card game never really took off in America. Shaman King is one of the many Upper Deck Quick Strike properties. For anybody who played the Quick Strike Upper Deck games, they had this one engine. They would just throw a bunch of properties on it. It was this Quick Strike engine, and they had like Pirates of the Caribbean on it, a whole bunch of really good properties, but they threw them on this kind of mediocre engine that really didn't make a lot of sense for properties.
I remember
Yeah.
that.
Charger for Ryoku, yeah. And I was, it's like, why is Pirates of the Caribbean made no sense to me? Why they would use that system? It didn't correlate to like fighting pirate ships or finding treasure or anything. There's another one of ours, Sonic X.
Sonic X was a card game?
Yes.
It started out as a collectible card game, and then they're just like, whatever,
So, yeah,
make it a $5
it was one of those things. We had the property. Sonic's a pretty big property. It's big in mass. You know, and at that point, like if you haven't figured out, you get your card game in mass, in Walmart and Target and whatnot, it sells. That's like where you get your largest selling numbers. That's where your biggest profit margins are. So Sonic is a big property. We had it because of Inuyasha. They were all Viz properties. We released it, and it was basically, like, I don't know if anybody here played it, but it was like kind of like Uno with numbers. It was really simplistic. And we were like, the game was okay, but there's no way you're going to do tournaments for it or anything like that. It was basically a children's game. And what we got back from mass was that it was selling, but people really didn't like the fact that it was booster packs and stuff like that. So we eventually, later on, repackaged the game where you could buy like all the cards in one set, where it came in just like a starter deck thing that got every card in it. And you could play it with like, because that was one of the few games we could play with like 4 or 5 people at the same time. And once we did that, we had quite a bit of success with it. We were actually going to reprint it at one point, but they decided not to. We printed enough product up front because like we treated it like a board game. And what you do with a lot of board games is you take this high cost of production up front and you produce a whole bunch of them. And ideally, you would sell a lot of the, maybe 20 or 35% of that product up front and get out into stores. And people would play it at home. They'd tell they'd be like, oh, I like that game, so I'm going to buy one for myself. And then as the years go by, you kind of go through that backstock of product, which works if you, like we were at that point, an established company, and we could afford to print a lot up front. And we printed enough Sonic X and we sold through it over a couple of years. And we were actually going to reprint that, and we were going to reprint Fruits Baskets. Because the year Fruits Baskets came out, it was our second highest grossing thing in our game division. It was like Inuyasha than that, and then it was Dragon Ball Z. Whoever would have thought that a Fruits Baskets product was going to beat Dragon Ball Z in any form of sales. And basically,
we were running past 6 o'clock and then we're in a film.
Oh, okay, so we'll go through. Basically, what happened, we were going to reprint those products, but once we got to here, that was kind of our swan song, and that was the end of Score Entertainment.
So wait, Score is closed now?
Yeah,
I didn't even know that.
we closed for 4 years.
That explains why I haven't gotten any emails.
Yeah, exactly. But there's no website.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
I still have my scorecards, so.
Bleach, we just didn't have enough playtesters or anything to do that one. So here's a little trick. If you take Bleach cards and you take some Marvel and DC Versus cards, you can find some direct correlations between one and the other, because it's like, well, we need to come up with a whole nother team, but we don't have time to play test. So I would just look up something in Versus system and be like, well, here's a team that doesn't seem like it would be broken in Bleach. And we would straight up just take the same card powers, translate them into Bleach, and there's a lot of Versus cards in Bleach.
Really weird stuff.
Yeah.
Extreme fraudulent shit right there.
Yeah, Masaki was the Amazing Spider-Man. That's if you look at students, half the Totskis were just Batman cards rechanged into something else.
So we'll zip through these real quick. Zatch Bell, the only interesting thing about that is you use a spell book in that game.
Yeah. It didn't have a deck.
Yeah, it didn't have a deck, you used a spell book.
Yeah.
Oh, he has a spell book, sweet.
Get your
Yes.
wicked magic out of here, you
Spell
sorcerer.
book, and you can duel each other.
Bye, Garrett.
Later, dude. Wow, what's in there?
It's like Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Our tokens.
Bleach cards.
I still have all my basketball numbers. There's a lot of decks.
Then Naruto, which is still around. That's rare on this list.
Yeah.
Outside of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, Naruto's the only one that's still.
Somehow.
Oh, and Card Captor Vanguard, but the jury's
The
still
well,
out.
Cardfight Vanguard just came out
Yeah,
like
just
2
came
months
out.
ago. That don't count.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
Robotech.
you can see
which,
from the list, it goes from 2008 to 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah, Robotech.
Robotech.
was an old product. I
Yeah,
can't believe that got
Robotech was
PCG.
interesting because they released the Bleach, the starters, and they never actually released the boosters. So the only thing that came out was starters. Bleach, which we've already kind of talked about. Bakugan.
I don't even know what that is.
And,
Well, it's whatever.
Dinosaur King. I don't know what that one is.
Wasn't it
It's
like
about
Shaman
the
King with
dinosaurs.
dinosaurs?
And
Most other dinosaurs don't recognize its sovereignty.
and then Dragon Ball Bandai Edition, which it had its run. It actually got into mass and did okay for a little while.
Isn't that one compatible with the Naruto?
It is
Yeah.
compatible with the
Was for a little
Naruto.
bit.
Yeah.
It's not.
And then the Cardfight Vanguard, which was the new one. It's apparently pretty popular.
Has anybody actually played that?
Yeah.
How's it work?
You can get demos of it in the TCG.
It's really random.
It's incredibly simplistic, but I just paid $800 selling it today, so.
Yeah,
I
it's really
enjoy
popular.
it.
Don't they
So
only
I
have
hear.
like one card type? It's like characters.
Yeah.
Just like
It's
G.I.
just
Joe
characters.
Oh, yeah.
They essentially just
Yeah.
evolve
Zero,
from
one,
each other,
two,
and you just play them over top of each other.
We're releasing sets like clockwork.
And then that's our website. If you want to come and see our website. We have,
JustSaying.com.
Just saying. We run the retro DBZ tournaments. So if anybody out there likes to play the old Dragon Ball Z card game before GT, we have a tournament tomorrow.
I'll see you there.
Yeah. So you don't have to actually own the cards. You can just go onto our website and print out copies of the cards and play if you want. So. And then we have one more panel this weekend, guys. We have we've kind of touched on a little bit here, but the rise and fall of Score Entertainment. We're going to have a whole bunch of other Score employees.
When is that?
It's 5 o'clock on Saturday, and they actually put us in one of the real panel rooms because
Yeah.
I guess they think that we're going to.
That's
like,
going to be fun.
Yeah, we're gonna have.
So
some
do you guys
kind of
have like
solo
300 friends that you want to bring so we can make it look like there's a lot of people? It'd be really good,
I'll sit on 2 chairs for you.
All right, thank you guys for coming out.
Yes.